Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Please just shout if you can't hear me at the back. I'm a massive mumbler. Welcome to our talk on the gamer's world. My name is Ben Thrasher. I'm a strategy director at Design Bridge and Partners, London. And I'm joined here by my colleagues Marta and Eric, Kai, one of our clients, VP of fan marketing from EFG, and Frankie, a gaming host. One thing about me is that I thought this session was an hour. It's actually 50 minutes, so it's going to be very fast. We're going to zoom through the slides. We're going to talk a little bit about the world of gaming. It's got 3 parts, so it will be rapid. I'm going to set a little bit of the scene about the areas of opportunity in this category, and then Marta and Eric are going to talk about some amazing work going on, and then we'll have half an hour for a panel discussion about the world of gaming in general. So first of all, just to set the scene a little bit, I think it's important to understand why we're having this discussion today. And none other than our Mario Bros. Film, which launched a couple of months ago, has now grossed over $1 billion, showing the increasing prevalence of gaming in our society. So whether you're a gamer or not, we are really living in a gamer's world. And if we need any other nod that this is a category for everybody to get involved with, our favorite disruptor, Netflix, is also increasingly investing in Netflix games, which now has over 2 million users a day. So when we're all designers here, we're all creatives, we're obviously all very interested in this big opportunity. And when people come to us at Design Bridge and Partners and they ask about, what is my space to play? Where can I really kind of engage with this audience? People always think about the game and think about gameplay, okay? And they think about those very, very immersive experiences. But actually, if you take a step back, you can actually have a look at the world of gaming through various lenses. First of all, publishers give the world something to play with. So games like Wordle, single-player mobile game. Seems very simple, seems very benign, but that's at one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, you have games like Fortnite. Very, very immersive, all-encompassing games. People, when they think of gaming, they think just of this side of the spectrum. They think that gamers only play Fortnite and all these very kind of big interactive games. But actually, gamers and the world of gaming is this whole spectrum. So when we think creatively from a strategy perspective or from a design perspective, it's all about how do we create for this whole spectrum and for this whole ecosystem. But one thing we're very passionate about at Design Bridge and Partners is actually beyond the game, it's the world which sits around the game. So if we talk about the publishers, they create the games. There's so much going on in the world around that, from esports to streaming. And so if we have a little bit of a walk through these areas of opportunity, you'll see how exciting it really is. So first of all, esports. Esports is one of the fastest growing categories within the gaming segment, and it's the competition which sits around the game, okay? And Kai and Frankie are experts in this field, and it's a world of absolute creative opportunity, okay? First thing. Second thing about how you get involved with gaming beyond the game, it's all about streaming, okay? There's a massive influencer and creator economy, and you'll recognize Frankie from this big slide. Again, Marta and Eric will come and talk about these worlds a little bit later. And the last thing, just to highlight, the exciting thing is the world of, and it was unbeknown to me before I got involved in this category, the world of cosplay. This is not CGI. This is actually people, it's totally real, right? This category is, so exciting, and there's so much space for the creatives to get involved. Now, we talked about the spectrum of games, and we all know Wordle, we all know these games, but actually one thing that's as diverse as the games in this ecosystem is now the audiences, okay? One big stat that people often don't consider is that there are over 3 billion gamers in the world, and now with the increase of mobile gaming, this number is just set to increase, okay? That segmentation, that demographic is also more different to what we would expect, okay? Some of the fastest growing segments of gamers are not what you'd think. We have 55 to 64s, we have grandparents, and we have new mums. The new mums point is really interesting. There was a really good study done by Activision Blizzard a year ago or so about how new mums turn to gaming as they're so immersive, and the interactiveness of them helps them find belonging when they are at home. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have the geriatric gamers, as I was saying. This is a legit CS:GO Counter-Strike team. The silver snipers, and it's just so amazing and highlights the kind of inclusivity that this world has to offer. So this has been a bit of a whistle stop, but it has got us quite nicely to the creative question, is that from a design perspective, how do you design for the huge variety of activity in this ecosystem whilst catering for the most diverse spectrum of audiences? Okay, so we have that spectrum of games from Wordle to Fortnite, and we have the players of games from the teenagers to the geriatrics. How can we design and create products that serve this whole segment? Well, at Design Bridge and Partners, when brands come to us to help find their feet in this world, we try and approach it from 3 different angles. One is authenticity. So brands, especially brands from out of the category, as we'll talk about in a little bit, it's about how do you show up in this world in a very authentic and credible way. The second piece is relevance, is that how do you design for relevance? The gamers are like a very inclusive community, but they're a very tough nut to crack, okay? So how can you always add meaningful value to their experience? And the last point, which I think is the most relevant here today, is the creativity point. It's such a fast category, there's so much noise going on. If you're not creative, you will just go like a ship in the night and you'll not stand out. So that is a very, very whistle-stop tour of our point of view on gaming. I'm sorry, it was so fast. But I'm now going to pass over to my colleague Marta Swanee, who's a creative partner at Design Bridge and Partner, and Eric, who's a senior designer. And they're going to put this into practice and show you how, show you some amazing work which is going on in the world right now. Cool.
Thanks, Ben. Do you want the clicker?
On this?
Yeah, thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Marta. This is my colleague, Eric. And we thought we would, Ben's covered this idea of this kind of very exciting ecosystem that exists around games and a massive spectrum of gamers that surrounds it. So we've decided to choose 5 projects just to quickly go through that have interesting different creative approaches of brands coming into this ecosystem and really reaching and resonating with this gaming audience. Do you want to? No, I'm going to hand over to Eric to start.
Sure. Cool. Is this?
Yep.
Cool. So the first project that we're going to show is all about how do we unite these 3.2 billion gamers, or at least as many as we can. And this project is a visual identity project that we launched recently, and it is for the ESL Faceit group, which Kai is from as well. And ESL Faceit Group, or EFG, is basically a corporate holding company, but the thing is that they own loads of brands in the gaming ecosystem that Ben was talking about. Everything from the world's biggest esports events to gaming festivals to digital platforms and even mobile gaming. So it's pretty safe to say that they touch on pretty much almost every type of gamer out there. And I think unlike a lot of gaming companies that maybe focus on maybe 1 or 2 gaming titles at a time, EFG has their portfolio covers such a wide spectrum of both gamers and games. And I think that was kind of the biggest challenge with this project was how do we, speak to not only their employees in a kind of professional manner, in a B2B sense, but also how do we speak to their entire audience in an authentic way that doesn't feel like a kind of dad at the disco kind of thing. So yeah, we had to look for something that was like a common element through games. And what we found was in the UI itself. So the minimap is a pretty integral part of a lot of competitive games. It's basically what it says, it's a mini-map with the players kind of represented on it. And it's quite crucial in a lot of these competitive games. So you find it in Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, League of Legends. It's even in FIFA has their own mini-map. And I think what's interesting about it is it's a really important tactical piece of for the gamer. So it's where it's how you know where your teammates are, where your enemies are, and kind of get an overview of the entire field. Which kind of relates to them as a corporate holding company, having an overview of all the brands that they manage. But also, I think more importantly, the icons quite literally represent the player base in their games. So that essentially became the foundation for the entire visual identity, was using these icons from the mini-maps. And we use them as a graphic device, we use them as patterns, and we created this headline typeface to go with it. And then along with that, we also created these background images, basically, where we took the maps from games, so famous maps like Dust from CSGO, or the Dota map, and we kind of recreated them in 3D, and then sort of distorted them, blurred them a bit, recolored them. So they're more like an abstract background image, but there's a bit of a nod to the games that they represent as well. And yeah, that's kind of the whole visual identity for it. I think it resonates with gamers because they can look at it, they can find the icon or the map that they associate with the games they play, but also I think it kind of shows that EFG it's a company that was started by gamers, but it still is run by gamers. They still get it. They're still very authentic. And we launched it recently, and it was quite successful, both internally and externally. So we're quite happy with that. The next project is a little bit different. It's actually a campaign done by the agency David in Sao Paulo. And I think where EFG kind of found a graphic device, a common graphic element throughout games, this relies more on finding a common experience that all gamers have been through at least once. So I'm just going to play the video first, and I'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. So yeah, basically Burger King glitched out their own app and let people or gamers find the glitches in their app for more discounts. But what I thought was even more clever was the fact that they told gamers all over the world to basically just upload a clip of any game that you're playing where it's glitching out, tag us in it, and you get more discounts. I think that's the kind of smart thing where it's something that gamers already do. Glitches are hilarious to watch. They're really frustrating when they happen, but at the same time, they're just quite funny. I mean, that video is just a joy to watch. And I think we're a bit jealous because we've always wanted to do a project about glitches, but because we work with games publishers or hardware clients, they are really not keen on us showing any glitches in the games, but maybe one day we'll get one through. But yeah, I think it's just a really good way to show how an outside brand can come into the gaming space. And by showing that they have an understanding and an empathy with the gamer's experience, they can pull off a really successful campaign. So yeah, and that's those two projects. So Marta's going to take you through a few more.
Thanks. I don't need that. I don't need that. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. So those two projects were really about trying to find that common thread that could, resonate with all gamers, hopefully 3.2 billion of them, or as close as we can get. But sometimes you want to talk more specifically to a tribe. So, you need a way that you're going to talk to one tribe without alienating others, rather than maybe everybody, all gamers. And this next project, we did it with Easter eggs. But this was a project, another identity project that we did for ESL, the world's biggest esports company. And we did it. First project we worked with Kai on, who's there. And for this project, when we were looking at designing this identity for ESL, we were very conscious that esports fans tend to follow one game competitively. So if you are, for example, if you're really into CSGO in esports, it's unlikely that you might follow, say, Fortnite. So we were really aware that esports fans really tend to have one game that they're really, really passionate about. So we wanted to create an identity that could really speak to those specific fans. So what we did is we created an identity where we hid game scenes into the identity itself, kind of like a little Easter egg. And we called this concept Hidden Worlds. And what we did is we created these big camouflage, fluorescent camouflage patterns for the identity. They actually have game scenes embedded in them. So if you have a look at this one, we'll see, does anyone know? Any? What was that? CSGO? Yeah. CSGO. Okay, one more. This one's easy because I just showed it. Okay, last one. This one's hard. Hey, yeah, okay, cool, you got it. All right, so we kind of hid these game scenes into the identity so that if you were a super fan, you could spot them, and if not, it would just look like really bright camo. And then it was designed so that, using things like AR, it would really, really spring to life. And we applied that style across absolutely everything, whether it was like player portraits or the merch. And in the end, it gave us a pretty unique esports identity. And it was nice because we could wrap all these different game types together under one kind of common visual expression. And it also was it was really great when we launched it because at the time, this is a few years old now, but at the time, all the esports brands looked very similar and they were pretty much all taking visual cues from like traditional sports, traditional American sports. But we really wanted to do something different because we really felt passionately that esports was much more contemporary and new and much more exciting, basically. So this really allowed ESL to kind of stand in front and really kind of stand out and really lead the category in esports. The next one is something different. This is an activation that we did for Intel, where what we wanted to do is we needed to relaunch their Gamer Days sales. So Gamer Days is a 10-day sale that happens all around the world, and it's basically the only time that you can buy really high-end Intel gaming gear at a discount. But everyone knows gamers don't like a hard sell, they don't like being sold to. So what we did is we rebranded Gamer Days as a gaming festival and kicked off that festival with this massive epic opening act. And you can see this is a bit of a behind the scenes picture. But what we did is we opened the festival with this activation where we assembled a 40-piece orchestra and we challenged them to play live with gaming influencer Dr. Lupo while he played Destiny 2, his favorite game. And it was a massive challenge because they had to play in real time and kind of change what they were playing to match his gameplay. So I'm just going to play a little film about that.
This is it.
You ready?
There's been nothing like this that I know of where you have a live orchestra tracking to a game.
Go.
You ready?
We are ready.
If I had to choose any game to play with a live orchestra, 100% it's got to be Destiny. But I am terrified because if I mess up, then they're going to have to start over a lot of times.
An orchestra tends to go in linear fashion. We start at measure one and we keep going. So we had to humanize what is a pretty complicated under-the-hood process.
I'm starting it.
Yeah, let's go.
So if, for example, Dr. Lupo wipes everybody out in the first 2 minutes, we can skip to the stinger and wrap it up and get ready to start just when he does.
Is it 40? Is it a 40-piece orchestra? Oh, man, that's crazy.
Oh my God, the music's lining up and it makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's so good.
When did I realize that streaming could help people? I don't necessarily know when that hit exactly. We help people go flawless from the beginning, right? But then it also turned into helping causes like the National Fragile X Foundation and Make-A-Wish. It's those kind of experiences that are part of the reason why I continue to stream.
It's a fascinating new way to tell stories.
This was an absolute masterpiece to work on. Oh yeah, that was perfect. Let's go, baby.
Clearly an awards film with the stats at the end. But what's I think interesting about this project is that, even though it's focusing on one game and one gaming influencer, it's such a spectacle and it's such a kind of performance that it makes it have great, big, broad appeal. It's something, any gamer can get into, maybe even some musicians. And it's also nice because it allowed Intel to kind of connect with the gaming community in a way that doesn't feel like being sold to like a hard sell. It's more like a big celebration of gaming and technical mastery that's kind of powered by Intel. And the last one I just wanted to touch on quickly, because we're probably running a bit late, is the Dove Real Virtual Beauty campaign that they've been doing together with Lola Mullenlow. So this is, as the gaming audience gets more and more diverse, it's really important that games themselves reflect that and the ecosystem reflects that. And this is something that Dove is, working towards with their Real Virtual Beauty campaign. And what they've done is they've teamed up together with partners like Epic Games, and they're working on creating new avatars and games characters that are more inclusive and diverse. And it's nice because it fits, so nicely with the Dove Real Beauty campaign that they do, which celebrates, the unique differences that women have. And so you can see on this picture, it's like real women on the left, avatars on the right. And it doesn't stop there because they've actually gone all the way into creating courses on Unreal Engine, where you can actually learn about appearance diversity and take courses and learn how to implement that in the game's design if you're a character designer. So it feels quite substantial. It's not just like a PR stunt. And it's a nice example of a brand that really knows their place in the ecosystem of gaming when they come in. And now I'm going to hand back over to Ben.
Thanks, Marta. Thank you very much for that tour of some of the amazing work. Now, we're going to hand over to our panel now and hear from people in practice in the field. So I have a first question for Frankie as a gaming and esports host. We've talked a little bit about the kind of spectrum of gaming and the kind of wider ecosystem, just beyond the games. And, we're all creatives here looking for that kind of like, where's that kind of unique opportunity to be creative? What do you find that's, particularly inspiring at the moment?
Hello. Oh, there we are. Inspiring, I suppose it's often what's around me because my job takes me all around the world. Last weekend my job took me to the Copper Box Arena in London, so it was a lovely commute to work. It was very novel to not be on a plane. But being in that environment that Riot and MSI, Riot for League of Legends had set up, and having a load of other broadcast talent around me meant I could go, okay, right, what are you known for? It sounds very basic, but what are you wearing? Like, who are the teams we have here? Like, just being surrounded by stories I can kind of discuss, or even just telling the story of how we put together the show. Like, for me, the behind the scenes stuff is kind of, I guess, what people who follow me are interested in. They want to know what I think about the teams, who's going to be winning, whether they agree or disagree with me, because it's social media, right? They want to have a conversation. So I suppose, in summary, the opportunity to have a conversation. That's what inspires me.
Thank you very much. Kai, Marta, Eric, what inspires you at the moment?
I think when we see kind of the presentation and go through it, it's just, you see that you have not this one audience in front of you and this one tool stack in front of you, but you have a rich landscape of tribes and of community and all of the parallels to other subcultures where you can, if you want to understand gaming, you have to understand subcultures, whether it's gaming or whether it's hip hop. And I think this gives you a bit like, as you go through all of the richness through it, and you apply the curiosity that you have as a gamer, it's almost like these inspirations come to you, because gaming is not gaming in game. Gaming is cosplay, and it's VR, and it's AI, and it's festivals where everybody comes together, and it's esports. And if you apply kind of your curiosity that you have naturally as a gamer, because gaming is in the end applying curiosity to a space, then I think they come to you, for a lack of a better description, how it applies to me.
And Kai, it's quite interesting because you talk about, the different tribes and the kind of like the massive spectrum again. You obviously working as VP of fan marketing at EFG, you work with some of the biggest brands in the world who might not be from the gaming category, but they come to you and you help them find their meaningful role in that category. So almost what advice do you give to the creative teams, and your partners when they're trying to look to get into this space?
I think it fits to the network idea of subculture, right? Like that you say, we see, like I've just mentioned a couple of them, but you've seen glitches and hacking and overclocking and cosplay. If you see all of that as a network of dots where you can plug in, I think the best advice is see where you as a brand most naturally start to connect. And for Intel, that was relatively easy. Let's say overclocking and performance is such a natural part to a CPU manufacturer, right? Like, so it comes very natural that they would plug in there and then maybe go into the example where music comes in, right? Like music of games is one of those networks, nodes where you can then cross-connect into. And then, so I think I would advise that you don't jump in and think you know it. You jump into the core of gaming and you think, there's this one gamer who will like your whatever product brand, but approach it through those nodes and start where you feel comfortable. And sometimes that's a bit of a search to where that starting point is, but take that time and then it will mostly come natural and authentic as you discover the more nodes in this entire landscape.
I think that's really interesting. And Marta and Eric, I'll come to you on this as well. As Kai was talking about that almost that starting point is how do you approach this? Where's your starting point when you help these big brands, nothing to do with the category, find their role?
Well, I think what's really exciting and probably inspiring is that when a brand comes and wants to get into gaming, this is like one that's not in gaming already, is it is almost like a bit of a puzzle. It's finding where's the meaningful role, what's the point of view, what's the meaningful role, and then what's the best way to kind of activate that in that ecosystem. And it used to be, in gaming as a creative, you would just be working on selling like consoles and games. But now that with that ecosystem, it's really interesting because you have to decide, where does the brand fit? What's this great creative idea and how best to express it? Is it going to be like in-game activation? Is it going to be something with an influencer? Like there's so many different avenues that it's almost like just finding the right fit. And then finding something original that hasn't been done before, because there are a lot of cliches in gaming, and we spend a lot of time just cutting ideas out, starting with loads and cutting them out until you find the perfect fit.
I think also, that's to find something original. I think sometimes you also have to look outside of gaming. And I think that is sometimes where the best creative ideas can come from is when you take one ingredient, which could be gaming, and then combine it with something completely different outside of gaming. So, for example, in the activation earlier where you had Dr. Lupo and Destiny, and then you combine that with a 40-piece classically trained orchestra, you get something quite original, I think. So yeah, it's just kind of combining two things that don't necessarily go together.
And Eric, you talk there a little bit about finding inspiration out of the category. A more kind of like a design question here is around you used to work not just on gaming brands, but now you do work on a lot of gaming brands. What's the difference? What skills have you had to learn to be able to do this?
I think. Well, I'm sure there's lots of practical differences that have crept up over the past few years, but I think for me personally, the biggest difference has been that I'm working with clients that I genuinely care about. I know that sounds probably kind of bad, and I probably shouldn't be bashing other clients, but compared
we
to
accept all clients at Design Bridge and Partners, and we love them equally.
But compared to working on, I don't know, a bank or an insurance company or something, working with gaming clients just is a big passion for me. And gaming's always been part of my life, but it's always been something that was outside of school or outside of work. That kind of thing was an extracurricular thing. But now I get to finally apply all that knowledge that I have from playing World of Warcraft for 8 years to my job, which is great. And I think yeah, there's like moments where I've opened the Epic Game Store and I've seen the DreamHack branding that we made in the Epic Game Store. Or we went to Intel Extreme Masters, which we had branded, and I got to see, you know, some of the best StarCraft players that I grew up watching play on top of my logo because it's being projected into the map. Like, that's crazy to me. So I think that's probably the biggest difference, like on a personal level. But I also think we've been doing a lot more varied work in the last 3 years than ever before. So I think we used to do a lot of visual identities primarily, but just in the past 2 years, I think I've been to 4 different Intel shoots, like film shoots, which I never thought I would be part of, like the activation work and stuff like that. So I'd say we do a lot more varied work as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. And Marta, you touched on it a little bit earlier on about how, you know, the kind of category to design in is, you know, becoming broader as it's more, you know, than just like the console or the game. But how do you think like the approach and the thinking to designing and being a creative in this category has, you know, kind of changed over the years?
Good question. I think, well, I started my career as a creative doing a lot of work for PlayStation as a client. And I think during that time, the big drive was trying to be as most radically creative as you could to sell consoles and games. That was kind of it. And that was a challenge in itself, but a really fun one. And I think back then, I feel like maybe it was just PlayStation, but I feel like you could take a lot more creative risks. It was sort of more like the Wild West back then. And now I think you have to, as creatives, like obviously you're still trying to be as radically creative as you can, and you're trying to figure out the right route and the right thing to do. But at the same time, you've got a lot of pressure often from clients who are very conservative, basically. So you have to kind of constantly be trying to push, push your ideas that are a little bit more kind of risky, try and take clients on this journey with you. And I think as more and more brands actually engage in gaming, they'll feel confident and probably will take more risks. But I would say a big challenge is not just like this challenge of this ecosystem and all these great things that you can do, but it's also being able to kind of push more sort of groundbreaking work.
Yeah, the idea of the kind of like the client pressure has changed over the years. Interesting. I don't know, Frankie, Kai, you both in your own rights work with some of these biggest brands in this space. What's your perspective on how they've changed over the years and what they need?
I'm trying to. So in terms of how they've approached their audiences.
Yeah.
So I think. Obviously, with the ESL, they have their benchmark kind of shows. So, for example, your Intel Extreme Masters Katowice, which you saw in the presentation, like a team called G2 raising the trophy and the spectacle. And what they've done is they've almost like refined their, I guess those events to show when the epic moments are happening during the year, because we have so many events in each different game in esports. So how do you direct your audience to the most epic moments? How do you funnel them towards those emotional moments where they extend beyond the initial audience? So they extend beyond the Counter-Strike audience and actually do take root amongst other communities and bring them in. And I think that ESL does that, or EFG as they're now known, do that incredibly well with Intel Extreme Masters Katowice and another event called Cologne as well. So I think that's one of the things that we've, I guess, seen changing is brands recognizing, or I guess tournament organizers, we would call them, recognizing their power and going, okay, how do we now take something that we've spent years establishing and extend the engagement and the reach even further, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's really, really interesting. And Kai, you've worked, for years with these big brands such as Intel and DHL, and the same question to you really. What's the questions they're asking you? How has that changed over the years?
I think the big change that we see is not necessarily only with partners, but with any connection that we have, is that there's a generational change. When I have started in this job in the mid-2000s, it was nobody understood you. You were those aliens that like those weird nerds that nobody wants to touch or see, and we see like that weird things were attributed to us. And by now you have so many people and gamers in news edit rooms. You have it in parties, in political institutions, in companies, in agencies, in audiences, that it feels that generational shift has made it easier for us, because now there was somebody outside who understood us. And we see that in the agencies, that young people or young employees in agencies and in companies kind of step up and be that ambassador that needs to still translate a bit to the older audience, more conservative audiences who like to pull out their style guide and say, here, line number 20 has this font, and they say, nah, that's probably not how we do it. Let's dive in and let's get our fundamentals good and be authentic in that space, rather than trying to kind of force your thinking and style and so on into that world. And young ambassadors are the ones that say, hey, let's try partnering up with influencers, with agencies, with companies in the space that just make it easier. So.
And Kai, one thing I'm interested to hear from you is that we touched a little bit on earlier on about the changing demographics, and you said here that it's not just like young nerds anymore. How like EFG has so many like products from festivals to esports tournaments, lots of streaming. How are you seeing this change in audience?
One interesting example is that you have to, in the same portfolio of brands and products, have to cater for like vastly different audiences, and sometimes they are very close to each other but far from each other. I'll give an example. Like gaming can be for young people a bit of escapism and like diving into a world where you can apply your curiosity and your creativity to, and you really don't want your parents anywhere around when you're exploring that space. And and at the same time, we are now at the age where, like, I don't have kids, but I could have had kids, right? Like, it could be a thing that I connect to a next generation through a topic. And those two things are happening so close to each other, right? Like, young person couldn't, like, really want their parents out of what they are doing, and generations connecting over games in a festival. And I think that goes back a bit to this tribe thinking, that you have to be comfortable on not doing one design that fits this, but you have to go in a bit and do the work and do the homework to do the right solution in the specific nodes of a network, or like going back to very traditional persona making, right? Like that you have the explorer type, the parent and kid type, the I really don't want my parents around type, and then you cater for these kind of micro communities and micro tribes, rather than one size fits all solutions that will probably not work in gaming.
I find that interesting how you say, it's almost getting more tribal now, more segregated. And, an interesting thing about gaming is that it's actually a fairly equal gender split, male and female. So, and I'm going to go off script here. Marta and Eric, a question for you is, we talk about the different personas and we talk about how we can cater for these different audiences. How do we, what is your point of view on the kind of diversity in the category at the moment? And as designers, as creatives, what should we be thinking about to ensure that this is the most inclusive space possible?
Well, I think, when we do work in gaming, we try, we try not to make a super gendered kind of like designs or identities. We've been told often, like for example, we're often told that the ESL identity looks really female. Have you heard that? No. I'm always surprised. I'm like, no, it's non-gendered. But we try anyway not to fall into kind of, there are a little bit of cliched kind of like ideas of design and gaming that are definitely hitting this like old-fashioned notion that all gamers are 16-year-olds in their basement, and we try and avoid that at all costs always. And I think that you still see it though. You still see people producing work like that, and you still see a lot of you still see sort of people describing esports as just being like all male. And if you go to an esports event, you'll see that it's like really mixed. I was always amazed how mixed it is, and really sort of, you'll go to the Fortnite stage and you'll see a lot of really young kids and their parents, and then you go to CS:GO stage and it was like radically different, you know. So it is a really diverse audience, and I think the best thing to do is just try and stay away from sort of stereotypes and cliches when creating work and designing for that space.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Frankie, you obviously have worked across so many different esports events. You have a really unique perspective, traveling around the world, meeting all these different gamers. I don't know. What's your perspective on the idea of diversity, and what should we as designers and creators be thinking about to make sure it's as inclusive as possible?
Well, for start off with, I never thought of the ESL branding as female, but I definitely think of it as inclusive because it, as you say, it picks out gaming scenes, and like you recognize that if you're part of the community and it doesn't reject you on the basis of who you are, it brings you in. And if you don't recognize those scenes, you still think it's a cool design, right? So it really is successful in that sense. When I started full-time hosting, it was 2018, I was very often the only woman on the talent lineup. And what I've seen over the past few years is it's really increased in terms of diversity to the point where people will call out if they don't see it, but it can totally be better. So I think with brands and even with tournament organizers, it's a case of making sure that people feel like they can be involved. So one of the things I've noticed with audiences that I've visited or done shows with, or I've been in the audience with, is when there is female representation in the games, and more diverse representation outside of the traditional cis hetero male, the audience will actually reflect the characters they see in the games because they feel like they're there. Now, I know this isn't about game design. This is about how you're branding to people who play the games, but that's something definitely to bear in mind. Don't go in assuming that everyone is male who plays Counter-Strike, for example, because when you make other people who aren't traditionally represented feel seen and feel part of the community, it's a really powerful thing because that is the thing that people really watch esports for. It's the skills. They sometimes want to apply that to themselves in game and think they're going to be the best Counter-Strike player in the world, simple, for example. But the other thing that's really key about it is they get to talk to each other. And when you're watching esports events, whether you're in person or if you're watching on Twitch, chat, or YouTube, they're very much live experiences because they're people coming together and connecting over the same thing. Then outside of the broadcast, they're connecting on Twitter conversations, they're connecting on Reddit. It's all about feeling seen and feeling included. And so being as diverse as possible, yes, you will have some people in the community who go, well, hang on a second, that doesn't look like me, and I'm used to things looking like me. You will get that because they're desperate to be heard and they're going to do it in sometimes the unhealthiest way possible. But the people who do feel included, like, I still get people coming up to me or in DMs and things like that, and they tell me it's important that I'm there. And now there's a lot more people who look like me there, and that's quite important to hear because I didn't realize that until people started talking to me about it. So yeah, basically include everyone. Just even if you don't see them already in the audience, they're probably there.
Thanks for that, Frankie. And the countdown clock has gone a very ominous red. So we'll do a bit of wrapping up, which is like, I think what you said there is really nice. It's just like include everyone, be authentic, and be creative as the kind of building blocks of success. Now, I am going to ask Eric one more question, which is, to all the designers and creatives here, what's your one bit of advice for people who want to get in and work in the world of gaming?
Well, I think, let's see. First of all, pretty obvious, play games and read about games journalism, because I think it is so important to stay on top of this like constantly shifting landscape. There's like the fact that there was no genre called Souls like 15 years ago, and now Elden Ring's like the best-selling game. It's so important to stay on top of this, just to have creative, like original creative ideas, basically, and not fall into the kind of cliches that you often see, like boss level, leveling up, 8-bit music, that kind of stuff. But also, if you're looking to get into the world of gaming, try to have some kind of personal project in your portfolio, or just any project that relates to gaming, because if I go through a portfolio and I see anything related to gaming, I immediately spot it. Even if it's like an illustration of Boba Fett or whatever, it doesn't matter. Anything, it will catch our attention way more than just saying, here's my work, and also I'm a gamer. So that's probably our biggest tip.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And thanks for the panel. And thank you to all of you for coming along.
Thank you.